Hello dear story manifestor, I am so glad you're here. On this channel we give you writing pep talks, writing mindset advice and all things storytelling. I'm Leah Falls, writer, actor and mindset coach, and today we're going to talk about 8 general pieces of advice for writing a lesbian character. Let's start! So you've decided to write a lesbian character. Awesome. I'm always excited about new representation, more representation. I think diverse fiction is so important. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here to learn. When it comes to representing any group that you're not a part of, learn as much as you can, listen to own voices, try to get diverse beta readers and beta readers that are in that group. And I would also recommend hiring a sensitivity reader just to make sure that you're covering all the bases. Hey yo! Anyway, I'm hoping today's video will give you a great start on the journey of reading a little bit up more about lesbian culture, lesbian characters, not lesbian characters, but good representation. I'm hoping my 8 points are going to cover a lot of ground. Now, I am saying lesbian characters just because a couple of the points are specific, but most of the points also refer to queer women in general, and I think some of them also refer to gay men. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm just speaking from my own experience. Now I'm an own voice. And I myself am also very researched on the topic. So do consider that this is my opinion, but it's coming from the source. Number 1, when is it representation and when is it appropriation? Now, appropriation in this context refers to telling a story that is not used to tell and that is therefore somewhat offensive to tell. So what I mean by that is don't write about being a lesbian, just write a lesbian. Now, it can be a facet of the story, it's a facet of her identity, but if you're not one yourself, you shouldn't focus the story on that identity. I personally think that if you, for example, write a high school romance and you've got a lesbian who just newly discovered it and is falling in love with a girl in that case, that's fine as long as you're not specifically writing about her coming out story. You're centering cats. That's fine as long as you're not specifically... So my cat just started to fight right under my... So you can, for example, write let's say you're writing a high school story and there's a romance between a newly out lesbian and another girl. That's fine as long as you center the story around the romance and not around her specific experience coming out, because that's just not quite your story to tell. So that's where I would say is the difference between representation and appropriation. And by the way, this applies to writing any minority or marginalized group. So I would keep that in mind. Number 2, similar to how you should make the whole story about the character being gay, that can't be their only identity. If your character is solely defined by their sexuality, then the chances are that you might be writing a token. So I would look into that because they're a multifaceted human being and you need to respect them as such. So make sure you acknowledge all facets of their personality. Are there any intersections? Are there maybe a person of color as well, or Black, Indigenous, or are there any neurodivergencies? What's the whole background? What are their dreams and wishes and hopes and fears? You know, all the regular character stuff. Even if it's just a side character and you don't want to dig into all of that, do figure out what defines them outside of their sexuality. Number 3. Do respect it as an important aspect of their identity though. Now, it can't be their whole personality, but it is a big part that alters your whole perspective on life. So you do need to respect it a little more than just saying, well, they're gay and they maybe have a love interest at some point. It does affect them more than that. So, for example, how connected are they to the LGBTQ plus community? If they're not that connected, why is that? They grew up in a heteronormative world. How has that shaped them? How has that shaped their view on romance? How has that shaped their view on their worth in society? Saying everyone can love whoever they want dismisses the very real experiences, struggles, and joys of being in a minority group. So definitely respect that. Pay attention to how it has shaped your character and where in the world they feel comfortable. Where do they think they fit in? Where do they think they don't fit in? Because there's a lot of interesting information that's hidden in there. Number 4. Coming out is not a one-time event. Now, there are a lot of frustrating misconceptions about coming out, but personally to me, the most jarring one is the idea that someone, a lesbian, would always know innately that they are gay, and it's just not telling others, so it's sort of kept as a secret. And the microaggressive implication of that is that they're innately deceiving the world. You're born with a gay card and you know it, but you don't want to show anyone else yet, unless you're comfortable, until you're comfortable. And of course you can approach it with sympathy and say like, okay, yeah, they just need to be comfortable first. But just the assumption that they always know is not correct. Questioning your sexuality is just as much part of a self-reflective journey as so many other things in our personal development is. We learn so much more about ourselves as we go through life. So do appreciate the journey that they went on to discover their own sexuality, and don't assume it just happened as a toddler. Similarly, coming out isn't one big confession, and I see it so often in the media that it's just this one big moment, this one big conversation, but it's not one conversation. First of all, in the initial coming out, it's a lot of different conversations, and they can go in a lot of different ways. There's good ones, there's bad ones, there's meh ones. So don't generalize it into one. And also, coming out is a lifelong process. If your character is at all straight passing, they A, will have to keep coming out to people, and B, people might not believe them. And that's so fun. Number 5. This one should be so obvious, and it's not. Lesbians don't spend that much time thinking about how attractive men are. Now, this might seem silly, but I actually see it in a lot of books, like 50% of them. And so I really want to put this advice in here. In a lot of stories, the lesbian character either judges the men's attractiveness of the room, or they just think about it, like it occupies their mind space. Do you know how many beautiful women are out there? All of them. All women are gorgeous. Trust me, those men do not have dibs on my mental real estate. Also, honestly, I can't really tell who's supposedly hot, but somehow I keep reading books where the lesbian exactly knows it, and I'm just, how? Don't make your lesbian head of the man swooning club. Please. I'm over it. Number 6. Genitalia doesn't define sexual attraction. Oh yeah, I went there. AKA, please do not write a TERF. Please? Lesbians are attracted to women romantically and or sexually for their womanhood and not by the mere existence of a vagina. I know this point is controversial, especially among cis straight women who somehow see a lot of lesbians as damsels in distress and very much need to talk over them. But in general, in most lesbian communities I'm in and heard, this is sort of very basic understanding. So just to go back, TERF means trans-exclusive radical feminist. Most TERFs I know consider it an insult, but it is just a description. And before we go into trans women and trans lesbians in this whole group, I want to briefly mention that trans men and intersex people and masculine non-binary people exist. And when you're writing your lesbian character, please do not write them generally assuming that any man could be possibly attractive if they have a vagina. If you have one specific attraction, so like if you're straight or gay, you're not going to walk around and be like, I'm not technically attracted to that person, but I don't know yet what exactly is in their pants. This is a topic for a whole nother video, but by excluding trans women, you also are excluding cisgender women, so non-trans women, who, for severe disabilities possibly, don't have like the standard look down there. And it's really screwed up that, let's say someone is missing body parts, they're suddenly no longer a woman. That's just a very cruel way of looking at gender. Let's define womanhood by how well certain body parts conform to the beauty standard. That's feminist. Please don't mark the turf. Let your lesbian be attracted to anyone of the female gender that strikes their fancy. Thank you. Cool. We can move on now. Number 7. Say no to only heteronormative sex. Yes, we're going there. We already talked about that region. Let's dig deeper, dive deeper. If you're writing sex scenes, don't try to make your lesbian sex life match your personal understanding of what sex consists of. We're all different and a lot of research is necessary there. Porn doesn't count. But generally speaking, just a quick, and I'm saying this because I've seen it in so many books and it's very frustrating. For brevity's sake, penetration with a strap-on that looks exactly like a penis is not the only way and also not the most common way. It's not just a replica of straight relationships. So if you're writing a sex scene, please keep that in mind. Hands exist. Number 8. Explore their unique view on gender stereotypes. While lesbians go through the same sexist socializations and generalizations, they at some point, after coming out to themselves, have you been listening, realize that they do not fit into those stereotypes even if they try to. So the whole idea of trying to conform isn't really available to them. Now that doesn't mean you should try and make it available and force them into some very limited understanding of butch and femme relationships where one is clearly the man and the other is clearly the woman. Don't. Instead, see it as an opportunity to explore a completely unique feminist perspective. Now, both opportunities and struggles can come from this. On the one hand, your character might have an easier time spotting toxic masculinity and unhealthy relationship habits that otherwise are covered under the heteronormative umbrella of like, no, that's just how relationships are. But on the downside, your character might struggle with defining their own sexuality outside of the male gaze and outside of female objectification because all attractiveness is somewhat linked to objectification, but there's so much toxic objectification out there that it can get confusing. So they might, for example, be very anxious to repeat sexist behavior that has been done onto them just in a flirting way. And that's actually where the term disaster lesbian came from originally. And disaster lesbian, when you start digging, you'll definitely see this. And it's sort of a joke, but it's also somewhat sad because there's this intrinsic non-understanding of how our attraction and the behavior in it can fit into heteronormative society and into feminism. So there's a lot to explore there, and I would definitely really dive into your character if they're play more of a main part, even if they're not, and see how they understand flirting and how they understand approaching people, because it's not as easy. They didn't get the rule set. We didn't get the rule set that everyone else has. So there's a lot to explore there. Now the question is, if you don't have any rules how relationships and romance and sex work, where did they get them from? Did they get them from the LGBTQ community? Did they discover or write them themselves? Did they piece it together from stereotypical media, which is very common? So do explore how they really understand romance and where that came from, that understanding. Writing diverse characters can be very intimidating, but it's also so exciting and rewarding because you broaden your perspective and you get so much more to play with and explore. And we writers are fascinated with human nature, and if you force yourself in a position where you have to understand human nature that is not intrinsically connected to you, you learn a lot, and it's wonderful. It really does develop you as a person. That's something people say. Oh yeah, personal development. It is something people say. So go for it. Write that lesbian character. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure to run it by at least people from the LGBTQIA community. And if you can, get a sensitivity reader. That's always a good idea. Have fun. Go write. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Before you go, I would love to hear from you in the comments if you have any questions or if you have anything to add to this list. I'd love to hear it. Let's spread the knowledge this time. Oh yeah, like we're spreading the knowledge. Thank you. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could benefit from it as well. For more inspiration, you can find us on Instagram at Manifestors, and you can sign up for our newsletter on manifestors.com. On our website, we offer writing services such as sensitivity reads, manuscript critiques, story fix, a quick way to unstuck yourself, character interviews, and much more. We also now offer a 15% discount to Black writers to empower voices and make our services a bit more accessible, because we all need to hear more voices. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and remember,